Show here on Patriots Press Pass on YouTube. I am Mike Kadlick from CLNS Media, joined by Alex Barth from 98.5 The Sports Hub, breaking down the Patriots versus Jets game from today. Patriots win 22-17, an ugly win, but I guess a win's a win, and you got to be able to win ugly sometimes in the NFL, Alex. And Patriots showed they can do that today. It was also Bill Belichick's 325th career coaching win, good for second all time, passing George Halas. So. At this rate, I think he's going to just stick it out and get to Shula and then see what happens from there. But again, ugly one, but always good to get a win. We're going to break this thing down, some bigger picture stuff, offense, defense, special teams. We're also going to use the chat a lot tonight to kind of let you guys guide the conversation. So fill up that chat with questions, comments, or anything, and we'll use you guys as well. But Alex, any initial thoughts before we start to break this thing down, just on how the game went today?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, this is one of those ones where a win's a win. They had to get back on track. Division football is usually pretty ugly. It's kind of a good, bad, and ugly game. I feel like that gets used as a catch-all when people, they write, and I just did this. They write their post-game column, and like the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, this was really a game that had good, bad, and ugly in it.
Yeah.
And you got to be happy. You walked out of one of those with a win, and you move on.
Yeah. Breaking news, too. NFL related, not necessarily Patriots related, but it looks like Cooper Kupp's down in the field and trainers are taking a look at him. So not a good thing for the one of the best players in the NFL. But yeah, again, good, bad, and ugly. On all three phases, really. I guess we can start with the offense first. Mac Jones returns to the lineup and plays every single snap at quarterback, something we haven't seen in over a month now. He was very up and down overall. He completed 24 to 35 passes for 194 yards. He had a touchdown, and he also had a interception, and also an interception that probably should have actually been an interception that was called back due to roughing the passer. He looked a little bit more comfortable in the pocket than he has in the past. Made a couple off-platform throws that I was pretty impressed with by him, but still doesn't look like the Mac Jones we saw last year got in the offense.
No, they had that tempo drive where he looked great, and now you hope we see more of that, and that's something that goes back to last year. The interceptions, I'm sure we'll get into the non-pick six. He had one pick that was registered to him that was not his fault, and another one that didn't go on the books that absolutely would have been his fault had it counted. I mean, that's a play that we'll probably never really know what happened there. It looked like an option route, and he threw inside, and Myers went outside. And unless one of them tells us, which they probably won't, we'll never know what the actual right read was on that play. But he still looks panicky to me. He still looks sped up. He's taking off running. He's throwing the ball away. He's still just uncomfortable. And look, part of me doesn't blame him. You saw what that offensive line looked like today. And granted, the Jets have a good defensive front there without David Andrews, but man, having to pull Isaiah Wynn, having to bench him, and then put him into a position he's never played in the NFL, that's the kind of day it was for the offensive line. So, Matt, he's back in the lineup. They just, and this is on the coaching staff as much as it's on him, and I don't mean to totally, pull away from the issues he had in this game, but they've got to give him opportunities to get more comfortable, and I just don't. I didn't see a ton of those today. There were some, and I don't know that he took them. There was early in the game, they're in the red zone. It was a first and goal from about the 8. And he has Nelson Aguilar open like on the 3, and he's not going to score. There's 2 guys standing right behind him. But, we heard Max say a million times last year, just take a profit. Sometimes you got to take a profit. When the defense lets you, got to take a profit. And he's just looking in the end zone the whole time. I think he ended up taking a sack on that play.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of play when he starts making those throws, I'll know he's back. And outside of the hurry up drive, when he very much did do that, I didn't see a ton of it. So it's a tricky spot, but the reality is he's not going to look like the guy he was last year until the offensive line gets back into shape, because this might be the worst. It's one of the worst offensive lines in football right now. I'm not going to say the worst because I haven't seen all 32 teams that closely, but this has to be up there, man. What happened today with him against a team that primarily rushes for, and they're leaving extra guys in a block, and he's still getting the crap beat out of him. That can't happen. That simply can't happen. you're not going to get good quarterback play if that's the level of protection you're offering your quarterback. And if you allow me to stall here for like another 15 seconds, I just want to find the total pressure numbers and hits numbers to make this point. And I forgot to pull the box score up.
No, it's good. He was sacked 6 times in the game. Like,
yeah, it was a career high 6 sacks. The Jets had 8 quarterback hits. I actually thought it was more than that. So that just it can't happen. It can't happen.
And some penalties too. Looking in the chat, Strange got some random Patriots fan. Strange gets called for 2 holds. The thing, I mean, with Wynn coming in, right? Wynn's a first-round pick. You bench your first-round pick, and then you have to bench your other first-round pick for your benched first-round pick, if that makes sense. Shuffling across the line, David Andrews is out. Ferentz is at center. Like you said, kicking Wynn inside because of Strange's poor play and mistakes. It's like that's when the shit's hit the fan, right?
Right.
A position that Wynn has played in college a little bit at Georgia. He was kind of a guard tackle. They moved him around the line a little bit, but again, hasn't played the position in the NFL. And it's like a team that kind of prides themselves as like a ground and pound team and tries to, establish the run and run the football and try and, build play action off of it. You can't do any of that without your offensive line. And it was atrocious today. The play calling I wanted to kind of hit on, just you had started to mention that the hurry up offense in the second half, it looked great on one drive. They ran, I think it was 6 plays in like 2.5 minutes, just bang, 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 right down the field, got into range, and then they slowed down. And it's like, why are we now slowing down? It's 2nd and 5, and then they let the play clock run, and they run it on 2nd and 5, and then 3rd and 5, they again let the play clock run down, slow the whole thing down. I think it was an incomplete pass, and then boom, they just settle for 3. It's like, no, why don't we just keep running at this pace and punch it in the end zone like we can with the momentum on this drive? It's like very hot and cold, back and forth on pretty much every aspect of the offense today.
Yeah, so I don't know, like, you're right. It was frustrating they went away from it. I wonder if some of it was, that was the offensive line without tempo. Do you really want to gas those guys? Which again goes back to just, and I'm not saying that justifies it. Like the offensive line has to be better because if your best offense involves that dink and dunk up tempo, which I think it does, well, then you have to be able to run that. And your offensive line simply not being good enough is not a good way to operate. So yeah, it was frustrating. And I don't know, that's why they went away from it. We saw them do this with McDaniels all the time where they would have like one tempo drive a game and it would be great. And then that would be it.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure exactly what it was, but yeah, it was certainly frustrating. They went away from it, and hopefully it's something that comes back in bigger numbers down the line. Because man, if you're going to make corners run with Tyquan Thornton right up the field, no huddle, like you're going to get chances to break plays. It's just a matter of setting that up, and of course, to set it up, you have to have the blocking, which wasn't there.
Yeah. I guess we can talk receiver room. Again, using this chat here, if there's any news on Devontae Parker. We'll start with, I guess, Devontae Parker. First play of the game, they set up a nice slant route to Parker, ISO, and I think it was I think the ball was behind him, but he comes out of the game with a knee injury and doesn't return. I don't know if there's any particular news on him. I know he didn't play the rest of the game, and it was he was like hit on the play, but it looked like a non-contact knee injury. It's not like someone came in and hit his knee. So that's never good for him to go into the tent, then go into the locker room and not return to the game. So I am not confident that we're going to get any good news here from Parker's knee, just because that's kind of the nature of the beast. Rest of the wide receiver room, Kendrick Bourne returns from his turf toe injury last week and gets 1 target. I don't know his snap percentage count, but that's a guy who, I guess the room is like deep-ish now with Parker and Myers and Aguilar healthy and Tyquan Thornton trying to get into the mix. But it's still like, how are there not plays schemed up for this guy? Because you lose Devontae Parker on the first play of the game, and instead of getting Bourne acclimated into the offense more, you end up it works because, again, like I said off the top, it's tough to criticize a win because a win's a win and they got the win, right? But Kendrick Bourne, no one target, no catches when like there's clear room for him, and then Ramondre Stevenson ends up being your leading receiver with 72 yards and 7 catches. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's just, I feel like we can get so much more from this receiver room that we're not getting right now.
Yeah, and the Parker injury too complicates. Maybe we can get to the trade deadline at the end of the show. Like I'd still be very hesitant to move any of these guys.
Yeah,
just because, like
especially
you said,
after Parker. Yeah,
you're still waiting to see who's going to break out, and now maybe you have an injury. I think you need to be careful at that position. The fact they won today kind of complicates. If you're 3-5, it's easy to sell. Who cares? They're 4-4 in an AFC that is wide ass open.
right.
So I think you have to stay competitive, and staying competitive means holding on to these wide receivers.
Yeah. Again, losing Parker, right? Say you do lose Parker, you don't want to.
Yeah.
I mean, hope for the best, expect the worst, right?
Right.
Jacoby Myers is a beast. I mean, he's going to get paid next year from who it is. I'm not sure. He has 9 catches for 60 yards, a touchdown. He made an unreal run after catch on one first down play today where he basically, the ball got thrown to him with like 7 yards to go, and he basically runs behind the pile and just reads every single block perfectly towards the sideline for a first down. And it's like, that's the kind of stuff that you didn't see from him in his first and second year with Tom Brady and Cam Newton as like an undrafted guy. He's just gotten so much better every single year. And that's prior to the Parker injury. That seemed like a guy who I kept talking about as potentially them trading because I feel like he's going to get paid and the Patriots aren't going to pay him. I mean, I don't think at this point, I don't know if it's going to happen because of the Parker injury, but fourth down catch on the touchdown as well. Jacoby Myers is just a beast, and him and Ramondre Stevenson are like the clear 2 best players in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, they're the only guys that are moving the ball. They accounted for almost 80% of the total catches and carries today. So, Myers great. I mean, shout out to Hunter Henry and Ramondre as well for setting the block on that play you're talking about.
Yeah,
The catch and run. But yeah, I mean, their offense is funneled through 2 guys right now. And I've talked about how I feel about Ramondre, them relying this much on him.
yeah.
I don't know how sustainable it is. And look, we've made it this far, but he went to the injury tent today. He did. So they've got to figure out. You're going to rely on certain guys more than others. It's just the nature of it. But they've got to start figuring out some secondary ways to move the ball because they're not there right now. And it's scary.
Yeah. Like you said, his workload is just like way too high. I mean, Harris had 11 carries, which better than last week splitting it up, but like he ends up with 16 carries and then also has 7 catches. It's like we gotta feed other people here, right? No snaps for any other running back besides him and Harris. 16 carries for 71 yards, but he also had a long of 35, which it's like he was good today running the football, but he was better catching it. And if you take away the 1 carry, that's 15 carries for 35 yards, which it was an offensive line problem, but like the running game was not there in an offense that wants to be able to establish the run as much as they do.
Yeah. I think it's mostly an offensive line problem, but again, you're not going to be able to ride him every game.
I know.
And you're starting to see it wear on him. So that I think it's a big picture thing. It's not to say like the issue for me with him was the offensive line couldn't get him going, but he took a lot of hits in this game. He took a lot of hits, and it's something, especially when he's slamming into the line of scrimmage and that's it, and he's not getting holes, it's a problem.
Yeah. Ty Montgomery news. Question from the chat. Is there any news on Ty Montgomery? Because that's a guy who could help bolster this running back room incredibly, both catching the football and, giving him carries. As far as I know, and what we've kind of seen, I guess, in the building, and what we've heard from Mike Reese as well, Ty Montgomery's in the building. He's still rehabbing, and we haven't really heard anything from him coming off the injured reserve. I know that it was his ankle that originally hurt him in the preseason, but apparently now there's a shoulder injury that is bothering him. So we don't know exactly what it is, but I guess hold out hope that he might be able to return at some point this year, just again to be a spell guy for these backs.
Right. Yeah. And we haven't heard anything, it doesn't sound like anything's imminent. So
right. Anything more on the offense? Again, like Mac comes in and doesn't play great, but they ultimately score 22 points and win the game off 5 field goals from Nick Folk. Do we think that like Bailey Zappi would have been any better? No. Like that's my opinion anyway. I don't think if there was Bailey Zappi in there that they would have won this game by any more points. I just think that, like, I don't think it was necessarily Mac's entire fault that the offense didn't run as smooth as it went. I think that it's an abundance of things. It's hurt wide receivers.
Right.
It's not having, and it mainly stems from the health and the lack of performance from the offensive line. But
Yeah.
in my opinion, I don't think Zappi changes anything today. Do you?
I mean, the one change would be they're much more hesitant to throw the ball down the field with Zappi. So, like, I don't think Matt Patricia really ever adjusted to the performance of the offensive line. Like, they were still trying to take deep shots well into the second half of that game. Maybe with Zappi, they call it a little more conservatively, so the offensive line isn't as exposed. But that's not like Bailey Zappi would have come in and saved the day thing, right? That's
Right.
Again, it's this problem of there's really two offenses here that they're running. And look, there was one play where they gave Mac Jones under center, play action, tight end up the seam. Those are three things they have not let him do this year. And he put it right on Hunter Henry for like a 20-yard gain. So
yeah, it was a perfect back shoulder throw right behind the defender. It was great.
Right. Like, they got a lot of issues to figure out. The offensive line, Matt Patricia, like Mac Jones is certainly a part of it. He has to be much better.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, like, you swap Mac Jones for Bailey Zappi and suddenly they win it going away. There's way more issues at hand than I think people have this idea that if Mac was just out and Bailey Zappi was in, the offense would be humming because of what they saw against the 28th and last ranked defense in the league. Detroit gave up how many points to the Cowboys today? Did they hit 50? I know they were flirting with it. So it's beyond Mac Jones. Mac Jones needs to be better. You know, people are going to come in the chat and say we're making excuses for Mac Jones and we're ignorant of Mac Jones' performance. He needs to be better. He did not play well today. But the offensive line needs to play better. They need to call it better. It's everything. The entire offense right now is stuck in quicksand.
Right. Building off the quarterback, I guess. Are there any good quarterbacks in the draft that the Patriots can go get? Alex Barth, you are the draft expert here. I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they're moving off this guy yet. But saw it in the chat. Any thoughts on potentially grabbing a quarterback next year?
Yeah, so I kind of talked about this on it's actually an interesting take because a lot of people are talking about Mac playing for his job relative to Zappi. And we talked earlier this week, Mike, about, what the ramifications would be if Mac Jones was benched. And I think people have this weird idea that if Mac Jones is benched, Bailey Zappi becomes the guy you're building around.
Right.
He's not, because similar to Mac. In the reality, you kind of build this around Zappi, we're going to be back here next year having the same conversations starring Bailey Zappi as Mac Jones, right?
Right.
So the element of Mac is playing for his job is he has to keep them out of a position where they can draft a quarterback that's better than him. You look at where the Jets were in 2020, right? Where they had recently taken Sam Darnold. What is he, second overall, right?
Yeah,
third. Third. Saquon went second, right? It was Baker, then Saquon. And Darnold. They had taken Darnold third overall, and there was questions, is he the guy? Isn't he the guy? And the question kind of answered itself because he didn't win enough games to get them out of the way of being in a spot to take a guy. Now, they drafted Zach Wilson, who's not the guy. That was their mistake. But, I don't think the Patriots are going to be bad enough. They're at 4 wins. They're not going to have a shot at C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. We're going to be the 2 top quarterbacks off the board, both going to be top 5 picks. But, could the Patriots end up in that 8, 9, 10 range? And that's where you're looking at guys like Hendon Hooker from Tennessee, who, by the way, the offense they're running with Mac right now that's not working, Hendon Hooker would thrive in that offense. He has the arm for it, for what it's worth. That's where you're looking at Hendon Hooker. You're looking at Will Levis, maybe KJ Jefferson from Arkansas. Like, those guys are all going to go top 15. They're not, maybe one goes top 5. They're all going to go probably in that like 5 to 15, 16 range. So if you want to talk about Mac playing for his job, it's not like they're going to bench him and give the franchise to Bailey Zappi. It's about if Mac is truly that bad that he gets benched, they're going to have a chance to draft guys who have a much higher ceiling than both of these two. And that's really what it comes down to.
But that's another situation, too, where it's like, okay, you do get into that back end range, but then you're still taking the 5th best quarterback off the board in a class. right? Because they just did that with Mac Jones. And
all right, but well, no, it's like where are they, right? With the 10th pick, you might get the third quarterback.
I suppose.
And what is a very good – and the whole fifth quarterback thing is – I don't buy into that, especially at that position where it's so weird. You know who the fifth quarterback off the board was last year?
Was it Zappe?
It was Bailey Zappe.
Yeah.
So they've taken the fifth quarterback off the board the last 2 years. People are bitching about Mac Jones. Oh, he's the fifth quarterback off the board. And they want to turn to Zappe, who, by the way, was the fifth quarterback off the board.
Right.
So
it depends on the class for sure. Because like this year, for example.
Right. It depends on the way the board falls. It's just when you're talking about Mac playing for his job, that's what it is. It's not
right.
Bailey Zappe. Like, look, will Bailey Zappe have a shot to win the job if Mac gets benched? Absolutely. But the bigger picture thing would be, if you want to go down that road, is, and by the way, the same goes for Zappe. Can he, if he ends up coming in for Mac, can he keep them out of a spot where they have a chance to draft a guy better than him?
Right.
That's whether it's Mac, whether it's Zappe. If he's that good, if he's good enough really to deserve a shot, he'll keep them out of a spot where they can draft an improvement.
Exactly. And getting a win today, that's why a win in a crummy game, in a bad spot today is so massive, because it gets you to 4-4, it gets you back to 500. And I sound like a broken record here on the show, but in an AFC that is not nearly as good as we expected it to be, the Raiders lose today, the Broncos are bad, the Chargers are kind of middling right now.
Colts are under 500.
The Dolphins, the Colts, they're all blech behind the Bills and the Chiefs. So it's like you can still compete and make the playoffs. So you'd rather make the playoffs than already try and think about, I don't want to use the word tank because they're not going to tank, but adjusting yourself and selling at the deadline. A win today makes you more likely to not sell at the deadline and ultimately try and compete and get into the back end of the playoffs, where anything can happen. To transfer us into the defense, Mac didn't win this game. Zach Wilson gave it to us. And I completely agree with this sentiment, because the defense was awesome today, but they were solid. They stopped the run. The Jets only had 51 yards rushing, so they really missed Breece Hall today. But Zach Wilson was awful. I mean, throws for 335 yards or something, but less than 50% completions, 2 touchdowns to the tight end Conklin, and 3 terrible interceptions. And if we want to talk about one quarterback from the 2021 class who is not the guy, it might be Zach Wilson and not Mac Jones.
Oh, yeah, no, anybody who's worried about what Mac Jones is, Zach Wilson is what a lot of people in New England think Mac Jones is, right? Yeah. We do this all the time with the nature versus nurture. I like to talk about this, where you can draft the best quarterback you want. You got to be able to put him in a position to succeed. Zach Wilson, I actually think the Jets are a pretty good situation right now. Robert Saleh's a good coach. They've got weapons. They've got an offensive line. Zach Wilson's just not good. He's really not. If you put him past the first read, he absolutely panics. He doesn't know how to throw the ball away. For whatever reason, bizarre. He can't comprehend throw it into the fifth row. That's what I think some of those interceptions were. Yeah, he was brutal. They kept him off his first read quite a bit. It was interesting because the coverage wasn't great, and he hit his open receivers. He did. He hit his open receivers.
Garrett Wilson had a day. They schemed him up pretty well. I think he had
Tyler
6
Conklin,
catches for over 100 yards. Yeah,
Tyler
again,
Conklin had a
that's
massive
the safety.
Game.
The safety struggles that Barth talked about pregame, and they got through there. But continue.
But when the coverage was there on the back end, I want to give the defense a ton of credit for this. Last week against the Bears, they were over pursuing, they were over aggressive, and Justin Fields had all this room to run around. That was not the case this week. They only had 2 quarterback knockdowns, and they both kind of came in garbage time late in that game. Yeah. But it felt like Wilson was under pressure pretty regularly because they were disciplined in their approach. They stayed in front of him. They got their hands up. They played a team game, right? They hemmed him in. They didn't just chase him. They made a point of where they were chasing him and using the boundary and using teammates, and night and day from what they did against the Bears. So that, you want to talk about the most encouraging thing from this game, the way the pass rush operated as a unit and kept Zach Wilson in check when he tried to extend plays was excellent. Again, just a complete 180 from what they did last week.
Yeah. 2 sacks on Wilson, too. Lawrence Guy had a sack. Josh Uche had a sack. Tackle for loss as well from Uche. Jabril Peppers led them in tackles with 8. So, again, they rallied to the ball. They got after guys. There wasn't too many like yak opportunities for the Jets, even though some guys were open. Again, like Garrett Wilson, who had 6 catches for 115 yards. Like, he looks like a good rookie. Again, the situation around Zach Wilson is really solid. With, I mean, even Elijah Moore, who after the game again said that he wasn't targeted and he doesn't know what his chemistry is.
He's
with Zach
getting
Wilson.
traded tomorrow.
Yeah, but it's like, but that's a good receiver too. He was awesome last year. So you have 2 guys like that. You have 2 competent tight ends, solid running backs. I mean, again, the injuries of Breece Hall and Elijah Vera Tucker don't help them out too much. But like even last week, Wilson wasn't the reason they won or lost. It was everything else around him. So tough one for Zach Wilson. But yeah, the Patriots certainly got after him. They did miss Kyle Duggar back there in the secondary, as you mentioned. Struggling to cover tight ends. Tyler Conklin had 6 catches for 79 yards and 2 touchdowns. Conklin looks like a freaking lineman out there. I don't know how or why that guy's good.
Dude, he looks kind of badass. The all-black uniform with the visor, the tattoos. He's got that look going on.
He's just like this chonky kid who's like, I mean, he does it. He does well. He was good last year with Minnesota, and he's doing it again this year with the Jets. But it's funny to see. And our guy CJ Uzoma, who we both said we thought was better than Conklin. I mean, he also had 1 catch for 27 yards, but it's like, you know, it's only 1 target, but it's a tight end getting 27 yards on whoever's covering him. So not great from the back end. Peppers was, I guess, pretty good, but I guess he was solid. He had 8 tackles and he was kind of all over the field, but they didn't do great actually covering and breaking up those attempts to tight ends. Peppers also had kind of a bonehead play where he kind of got away with picking up Garrett Wilson and slamming him into the ground. And then the very next play, he hit a guy out of bounds and got called for it. It was like, you just got away with one, like, play smarter football. But other than that, I think he was pretty solid today for Duggar being gone.
He was all right. He had a couple plays where he probably should have gotten flagged. They need Kyle Duggar back.
Yeah,
Devin McCourty played well. But beyond
him, they also handed him 2 interceptions. Like, he did play well, but I don't want to take anything away from McCourty, but it's like, I think Zach Wilson was worse than McCourty was good, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. But
yeah,
actually, Adrian Phillips was probably their best safety in this game. I thought he played well, but
yeah,
they've got to figure something out because they need him in the run game. Like, he's such a big part of what they do running wise. They need to get Kyle Duggar back, or Jabril Peppers needs to take this thing to another level.
Yeah. I wrote about it on CLNSmedia.com after the game, but just as far as Kyle Duggar goes and how they sort of mess things up against tight ends without him in the game. He missed the Ravens week, and the Ravens tight ends combined had 11 catches for 105 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He left the Bears game early, and Cole Kmet didn't do much, but he had 3 catches for 37 yards, and he had 2 big ones on Devin McCourty. So again, struggling to cover these guys at tight end. And again today, Conklin and Uzoma. So like next week with the Colts in town, I know they have Mo Ali Cox, who's a former basketball player, who's actually pretty good. Again, a guy who they're going to need Kyle Duggar back to try and defend him. So again, I guess you hope he gets healthy. He looked like he was trending to play at the end of this week. He practiced on Friday and was he was out there moving on his ankle, but someone they're going to want back for sure. Jawan Bentley has an interception. He had his first interception since 2018. Again, Zach Wilson kind of just handed it to him. Did Thornton play? This is back to the offense, but he did play. He had 1 catch for 13 yards. I guess they just did not again, whether they didn't look to him, whether they didn't scheme much up for him.
I'll say this about Thornton. So Myers had 10 targets, right?
Yep.
Thornton was the next most targeted wide receiver with 2. They did not throw the ball to the wide, and no other wide receiver had more than a single target in this game.
Right.
I don't look too much into that because the Jets have really good boundary corners. I think they're the first and second, either rated by PFF or opposer passer rating or whatever. They're the Jets outside corner, Sauce Gardner and blanking on the other side, Hall, right?
Reed. DJ
Reed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed in some major metric are 1 and 2 in the NFL. So not like I'll credit them this. I'll credit the offenses. They didn't needlessly pick on those guys.
Right.
So I don't look too much into Thornton not having a big day. Again, it's 2 targets. He's the only wide receiver besides Myers who's targeted more than once. That was a good game plan. work the running backs, work the tight ends, work the slot. Like, that's what you do against this defense. So,
right.
Trust me, there's plenty to blame the offense for in this game. There's plenty. Thornton not being involved actually made some sense in this one. We'll see next week, but yeah.
If they were struggling to get anything going on offense, and you're still, again, granted, there were some drives where they would have wanted to have back, right? But ultimately, they won the game. They got 3 points when they went down there. Nick Folk was 5 for 5 on field goals. We'll get to the special teams in a second, but like, if they were completely bashing their heads against the wall and not getting anything going or any points, and then you're still not targeting guys like this, we would have more to say, but you won the game and you got the job done with 22 points. So, like, again, a win's a win. Are Matthew Judon and Ramondre Stevenson the only real talents on this team?
No. Kyle
Jacoby
Duggar.
Myers.
Jacoby Myers. Kyle
David
Duggar.
Andrews.
Jacoby Myers. David Andrews. Tyquan. Nick Folk.
Tyquan already, huh?
Yeah, he can play.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Nick Folk.
Christian Barmore. I mean, they're banged up right now, too. Like, let's not
Yeah, they
forget
are.
that.
They're banged up.
They're pretty banged up. Like, how many of those guys Duggar, Barmore both missed the game? Those are probably your second and third best defensive players, Judon being number one. So, let's the issues I really, outside of a few fringe things, the issues I don't believe are with the roster. It's more of an asset management thing than just not having the right players. Are they the 07 Patriots? No, they don't have that kind of star power, but this is one of the stronger rosters they've had in the last few years. It's how they're managing it that's causing a lot of these issues. It's not the player roster, it's the coaching roster that we need to look at.
Right. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Let's go into, and I'm looking for a comment we just had here as well. Let's talk about Nick Folk and the special teams. Because, I mean, a special teams juggernaut that this team used to be, where it's all you could not all you could rely on, but a complete third of the game that you could rely on, I think that's pretty much gone for now. Anyway, I mean, today they were solid, right? Nick Folk has 5 for 5 and an extra point. Jake Bailey was better, but like, you have and Marcus Jones flipped the field to him a few times, but then you have this bonehead play by DeMarcus Mitchell on the goal line, where it's like, you have a perfect punt from Jake Bailey, and then DeMarcus Mitchell grabs the ball and rolls into the end zone like a buffoon. And it's like, if a guy like Justin Bethel or Matt Slater or Brandon King were down in that football there, they're clearly not letting that happen. And it's like, again, it didn't matter because they had the Jets. They had the Jets today, but that could be a game-changing play where you have this down in there inside, and again, it's just a bonehead play, and it's like, that's the kind of stuff where the Patriots always made that play, and today they didn't. It kind of stuck out to me like that's different than what we've seen here before.
Yeah, it was an interesting day for the rookies on special teams before we get to the kickers. So you had that from Mitchell. That's going on the teach tape. You're right. He had the first part kind of right, where you recover your ball with back to the end zone so you can block it. But what you do is when you start sliding, you just let go of it, right?
Right.
You just let go of it and let it sit there, and somebody else will come and down it. That's going on the teach tape. Bad rookie mistake. There. Bryn Schooler showed up. He made a nice play. He did. Patriots took they went up 10-6 with the field goal. They went up 16-10 with the field goal. He comes down, makes a tackle at the 17-yard line on a kickoff. So that backs the Jets up. The ensuing punt, Marcus Jones returns 32 yards to set the Patriots up with another great field position that unfortunately ended up being a field goal. But Marcus Jones is starting to look like when, not if, with him, right? Breaking one of these. So interesting day for the rookies on special teams. DeMarcus Mitchell, not so great. Brandon Schooler, Marcus Jones. I thought those two guys stood out, made notable plays.
Yeah. And Nick Folk, what a day. Again, 5 for 5 on field goals. He's like, it blows my mind. You tweeted that it was like his revenge game with the Jets, because a guy who was just such like the bounce around average kicker for like most of his career comes in here with the Patriots, and like you now talk about it like it's Vinatieri, Gostowski, and Folk. Like 3 very, very reliable and solid kickers, which after Vinatieri, it's like, okay, we've had a kicker for so long. Now we got to try and find a new one who's just as consistent. And then Gostowski comes in and has a career. And then he leaves, and there was a lull for a few years, but then it's like, okay, maybe we'll try and hang on to Nick Folk here. And he's just been outstanding. And I mean, good on him, right? It's one of those positions where it's really bad in the league right now. Not
Yeah.
really bad, but
Well, I
it's
mean,
tough
look
to
what
find.
happened in Carolina. Look what happened in Carolina today, right?
Exactly, right.
Eddie
It's like,
Pinheiro is considered like a pretty good kicker.
yeah. So, I mean, having him it's huge for them, right? I figure you'll have more on Folk.
Yeah,
You're a Folk guy.
there have now been 4 games this year in the NFL where a kicker went, hit at least 5 field goals without a miss. Nick Folk has the only 2 of those games that are outdoors. So that's, that stands out. I thought Jake Bailey was really good today. He had 2 I-20s. He had one that was fair caught at the 21, and then his lone touchback was the DeMarcus Mitchell play. Should have been a third I-20. So I thought he bounced back well today. Big, good bounce back day for the kickers overall. You hope you see him a little less. That's kind of the next step here. But yeah, I thought the kickers had a good day.
Yep. Do you think Thornton replaced Aguilar going into the chat again?
I'm gonna have to look at the snap counts. They didn't throw the ball in the boundary today, so it was tough to kind of track that.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see what else we could talk about before we wrap this thing up. Offensive coaching is a huge question mark. I agree. Like, it was a little bit better today. It didn't feel like it was entirely 2 different playbooks like we had seen in the past. They did dial up a few of those play action passes. They weren't just completely playing like chuck it down the field football, but it still wasn't great. And it's like, it's kind of too bad because I feel like they sort of ruined their 2022 season by not bringing in an actual offensive coordinator. And the excuse that kind of got brought up and bubbled to the surface was that they were too scared that a guy would come in and be taken as a head coach after a year. It's like, that's a no way to treat your second year franchise quarterback who like clearly needs some guidance here. And the fact that there wasn't even, and I don't know if there wasn't a thought, but if there was no thought to bring in a guy like Bill O'Brien, who coached with Mac Jones and talked with Mac Jones about the Alabama offense, has some familiarity with him and what the Patriots want to do from an offensive game plan standpoint. If he wasn't brought in because they were scared that he was going to go to Jacksonville or Boston College or wherever after a year, like, that's kind of bogus, and it's too bad because now you have Matt Patricia calling your offense and Joe Judge coaching your quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, Bill O'Brien wasn't available, but
what does that actually mean?
That they weren't going to be able to get him for that job. But it shouldn't be Bill O'Brien or a guy who's never called offense before. Like, there's other people who have experience
100%.
Calling plays, especially for young quarterbacks. Like, yeah, no, this is it. It all comes back to the coaching staff for me. It all comes back to, what they did over the summer and reorganizing the offensive line, changing the playbook to something that didn't fit Mac Jones' skill set, changing the playbook again to something that didn't fit Mac Jones' skill set, wasting 3 months of training camp, having the offense work on things that they're just not running anymore. Like, it all goes back to that for me. It all, whether it's Mac, whether it's the offensive line, everybody, it all goes back to just, it was such a mess in the spring and the summer, and you're kind of seeing the results of that now.
Yeah. I'm trying to check out anything in the chat that we can sort of bounce off more anymore. Any more thoughts on anything we didn't touch on today? Just from the game overall, Alex?
Yeah, I got one more note.
Go ahead.
We've talked about this before. Jack Jones, he's got to start arm tackling. He has to. There were 2 plays today. Everybody's gonna think of the Mims one, right, where he kind of pushed him. There's another one where they ran Carter up the gut, and Jones, instead of wrapping him up, pushed him, and it allowed him to fall forward and pick up another 5 or 6 yards. So it's still a big Jack Jones fan. Still think he's legit, but that's kind of the one part of his game that you kind of saw today why they're not putting him out there as like an 85-90% usage rate guy yet. He's got to get better at tackling. That's
why he's Jack Jones and not Sauce Gardner. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because you look at Sauce, you look at the way Sauce played that screen, right, to Jacoby Myers, where he had that thing read all the way, came up, wrapped him up. I mean, that's a high-level play for a rookie. That was great.
Are you talking about the one on when they were backed up on their own goal line, though?
Yeah.
They also didn't scheme up anything. They basically just chucked it out to Jacoby and said, make Sauce Gardner miss. Which that bothered me too. That was a tough offensive play call as well.
I think it was, let's see how the rookie handles this. This is a situation he didn't handle a ton in college. Like, I think the scheme of it was and I don't necessarily hate the general idea. You're putting a rookie in a situation that he's maybe not comfortable in. Credit to Sauce. He showed he's comfortable. What killed me with that play wasn't that they called it. It's that you should come back a drive or two later, run a play where Jacoby flips his feet inside, Mac pumps out there, then he turns up and goes, right? And seeing if Sauce will bite on that. 100%. I didn't hate the play call. I tip my cap to Sauce. He made a really good play. And this goes back to what one of my big issues has been with Matt Patricia. They just sort of run random plays here and there. There's no, and this is the one thing, and I was critical of Josh McDaniels at times for his play calling. The one thing he could do really well when he got in a groove with it was sequencing. He would run like 5 plays in a row, and you understood. You could see it build as it happened. There's very little, if any, sequencing with Matt Patricia. They're just sort of running random plays. They're not setting things up.
Yeah.
That was a great chance against a young player to set something up. And even if that call doesn't work, like sometimes with Josh McDaniels, there'd be these calls and it would be like, why are they they've run this play 3 times and it hasn't worked. What's going on? And then maybe it would take a week or two, but then they'd run something off of it and it would hit and you'd be like, okay, there it is. Like that. I loved it when Josh McDaniels did that. If Matt Patricia's doing that, he's really playing a long game here because you got to start running some, they've run the setups. They got to start running some of these, counter plays off of that. And it was a spot where I thought they had a really good chance to do it. And I don't know, maybe it comes next week, but against a rookie, I would have loved to see them set him up in that way and then run something off of it. And they just, maybe they called it, it got audible. I don't know, but go back to it, like actually run it. It never really came.
Right. Would you prefer Troy Brown at offensive coordinator over Matt Patricia?
I actually sneaky think Troy Brown got a little snubbed in consideration for that job. The thing,
I think so too. Because there was all the talk about who's the tight ends coach?
Nick Caley,
Nick
Caley.
Yeah, Nick Caley. It was like there was all this Nick Caley talk, and there was no Troy Brown talk. It's kind of bizarre.
So where that came from is when you're looking for a coach who makes sense in offense coordinator, quarterback coaches obviously are the front runners. Tight ends coaches are actually the second most likely because when you're the tight ends coach, you really have to have an understanding of the entire offense. You're working with the blocking schemes in the passing game and the running game. You're working with the quarterbacks, all of that. So that's why Nick Caley's qualified. That's also why Troy Brown's qualified because he was the running backs coach at one point. He spent a year as the running backs coach. He's seen this offense from a bunch of different angles. He got used to play quarterback at one point, albeit very briefly. Yes, I would like to. I do think he should get more consideration. He should have gotten more consideration back in the spring. And if and when they move on from Matt Patricia, he should get more consideration. Again, I want to bring this up because I've seen this question asked to me. I had this question asked to me like a bunch of times. Josh McDaniels left for a better job. He got promoted. He got more money.
That's a silly question.
Right.
Yeah.
He got a better job where he made more money. Look, he's not good at that job, and who knows how long he's going to be there. The Raiders didn't cross midfield today until 3:14 to go in the fourth quarter.
Right.
McDaniels didn't dip. McDaniels so it's the inverse of this. Yeah. McDaniels did such a good job with Mac. Remember, he was unhireable as a head coach. Nobody wanted anything to do with him.
Right. Because he left the Colts at the tarmac.
Right.
Right.
And the Broncos' tenure was a disaster.
Right.
He did such a good job. He took himself from unhireable to one of the first coaches hired in the process. He did not leave. He did such a good job with Mac Jones. Another team promoted him and gave him more money. I'm sorry. How do you get that? I keep seeing that. I don't understand why people think that's the case.
No, it doesn't make sense. And I would be absolutely thrilled to have Josh McDaniels back calling this offense compared to what we've seen this year from Matt Patricia. Like, I am a McDaniels fan. He's not a great head coach, but he can call an offense. He sometimes gets caught, like I said earlier, bashing his head against the wall a little bit and trying to get a different result. But like, he calls a really good offense, and like you mentioned after that comment, like Mac Jones wasn't great in his rookie year, but he was very good, and it was a lot of it had to do with McDaniels being the play caller and
Yeah.
kind of holding his hand throughout the season. Sorry for the pause, but just kind of looking, seeing if we can talk anything more. But any last wrap ups? I guess we can wrap it up. We're at about 45 minutes. Do you want to do Sunday Night Football picks, or should we wrap up Patriots first?
We can wrap up Patriots. I mean, do we want to give trade deadline thoughts?
Yeah, we can do a little trade deadline talk. It's tough because
let's do it like this. Who's the most likely guy to go on this team? If they sell, who's the most likely guy to go? I think that's the pressing question right now.
Okay, this is I've tweeted this several times, and I have no background information on this, obviously, but I really think that Jacoby Myers is sellable here, if that's what you're trying to do. And I know that they shouldn't do it necessarily because their wide receiver room is so banged up, and he's really reliable, and he's like a leader in the locker room and all that, but he's an unbelievable tradable asset who's on an expiring contract, and he's a guy who's going to be a candidate to get a massive amount of money this offseason. And I know the Patriots have some cap space to work with, and I think that they'll, I guess, try their hardest to get Myers back, but I don't think they're going to shell out an absolute bag for him because they already have a guy like Tyquan Thornton here, and they have Devontae Parker here for another year, I believe. So, I think if they're trying to sell and they're in sell mode, I think they could get a haul for Jacoby Myers on an expiring deal as someone who may not be necessarily a huge commodity to be re-signed here next offseason.
Yeah, I if they trade him, they're really selling. Maybe if
I
lost
agree
today and they were 3-5,
right
at 4-4, Bill's trying to catch Shula. He needs these wins, right? They're trying to get Mac turned around. Think about what this offense would look like without Jacoby Myers.
Oh no, I agree. I don't necessarily think they should, but I just think that all of those aspects.
No, that's fair. I asked you who the most likely would be. You think the
right.
most likely would be Jacoby Myers. I think Bill's too competitive to part with him, knowing what that would do to the offense. I think to me, it's Isaiah Wynn. I think he's checked out. I think they're done with him. They elevated Yadni Kajust this week. They have the tackle depth back that they need. I don't think they're going to be sellers at 4-4. I don't. I think Damian Harris is going to stay. I think Myers is going to stay. I think Agler is going to stay. Jabril Peppers was the one interesting rumor because he wasn't playing a lot. But if Kyle Duggar's banged up, you need him. I think he stays.
Right.
I think with Isaiah Wynn, it's beyond being sellers. I think with Isaiah Wynn, he's a problem. I think you're actually better if you move him at this point.
Yeah.
So
what
do
they get for him, though?
Goes.
What is out there? Who's going to give something up for him? I know, again, we've talked that tackle depth is so, it's so thin in the NFL, so teams will give up something to have even a backup guy there, right? But what is Isaiah Wynn worth on this market? A guy who looks like he's quit on the team, who got benched for a guy in Marcus Cannon, who's an older veteran and doesn't seem too reliable. I know teams will give something up, but what do you think about that?
It's going to be winning a 7th for a 6th.
Yeah, exactly.
One of those. Yeah,
right.
One of those. Or maybe they have a bunch of 6th-round picks. Maybe they tried to win in a 6th for a 5th. But something like that. It's going to be some sort of pick swap. They'll they'll move up on day 3 in a pick swap, and there'll probably be some sort of condition on it too, how much he plays or whatever. But it's going to be picked that we talk about them taking a kicker or punter with next year.
Yeah, agreed.
Or Grayson McCall.
Okay, Grayson McCall, Coastal Carolina's finest. The other guy I've thought of, and you mentioned it as being a no, is Damian Harris, just because it's another guy on an expiring deal who they probably won't re-sign unless it's team-friendly, like you said. A guy who probably seems like he would and could sign a team-friendly deal because he seems to really like it here. He's friendly with Mac Jones. He has an understanding, I think, of his place on this team with the emergence, and he's not a guy who throws fits or gets he's a guy, and so maybe someone who would be a re-sign candidate if, again, he's not going to take as much. But that's another one where teams who have banged up running backs looking for another spell guy, Damian Harris could be a candidate too. But do I see it happening? Probably not.
Yeah, again, I think, what did James Robinson go for again?
I think it was a 5th and a 6th or something.
It was a 6th to a 5th. So
is
it really worth? You're gonna get a 6th for Damien Harris when, I mean, they don't trust any of the other running backs very clearly, right? So then it's just Ramondre, and I don't think they have the depth to do it. I don't think they have the depth to do it. And at 4-4, I don't think they pull the trigger. At 3-5, they might have. At 4-4, I don't think they do.
Yeah. Do you think they bring anybody in? You think there's any candidates to bring in? What's the main position that could be brought in here?
Yeah, I think it's always possible they do one of those. Like, remember when they traded for Isaiah Ford? They gave up a 7th round pick and then he never played.
Right.
If they do that, probably the offensive line. I would think an offensive lineman. Maybe if Duggar's injury is worse than we think, a safety. But like you said earlier, he practiced at the end of last week.
Yeah.
Probably an offensive lineman, just given the way today went, the way things have gone. Honestly, I could see them in and out. I could see them trading Wynn and then trading for an offensive lineman. Like, that feels very realistic. And they're not buyers or sellers. You got to get Wynn out of here. And they need the depth, so they go grab another offensive lineman somewhere. Maybe an interior guy if Cole Strange is going to struggle. But yeah, I offensive line, whatever they do, I think whether it's buying, selling, whatever it is, I'm looking at the offensive line for a deal.
Yep, I agree. That's trade deadline talk, folks. Patriots, again, we'll wrap this up.
We'll recap it Tuesday. We'll be on Tuesday after this is the last show before the deadline. So
that's why we wanted to hit that. But that's trade deadline talk. We'll be back at it Tuesday to talk more about, like Alex just said, the trade deadline and anything that did happen. Patriots beat the Jets 22-17. An ugly one, but a win's a win. Again, I said it 3 times here, but it's good to be able to gut out some ugly wins in the NFL because a lot of teams get ugly and lose, and the Patriots got ugly and we're still able to gut it out. Trade deadline comes on Tuesday at 4 p.m., so we'll see if the Patriots are buyers or sellers there. Quickly, before we log off, let's talk Sunday Night Football because I like to make picks on non-Patriots games here. The Packers are at the Bills tonight at 8:20 on Sunday Night Football. I believe the Bills are like 11-point favorites, which is huge. A lot of points for an Aaron Rodgers-led team.
Yeah.
They're in Buffalo, so that explains it. It also explains it because the Packers just aren't that good. But I'll give my quick thought, and then you can kind of give a pick if you want. But I just think 11 points is way too much for Aaron Rodgers on primetime. I think that they'll find a way to at least keep it close. I don't think they'll win, but I think they'll cover 11 points in Buffalo tonight.
I think they're going to win. Aaron Rodgers is weird. It would be very weird for him to suck all year, go to face the team that people have ranked, 1 or 2, and win on the road in prime time. Like, that would be and then just be over it, right? And then act like it wasn't a big deal. So, I think Aaron Rodgers grabs the win tonight.
Look at that. Barth taking the money line with plus 11. All right, that's your Sunday Night Football talk, folks. Again, thanks for joining. Me and Alex will be back on Tuesday we'll do a little bit more Jets-Pats breakdown for our exclusive Patriots beat folks, but then we'll also talk some trade deadline and see what the league looks like after this weekend. So, again, Patriots beat the Jets today, 22-17 at the Meadowlands. Again, good win, ugly win, but they ultimately get it done. So we'll be back later in the week. Thank you all for watching, and